When you come to Ghana, it's actually the culture of America that exists in us. We can be entitled, we can be arrogant. We don't realize how American we are.
Do you think that maybe the local Ghanaians are a bit threatened by the influx of African Americans?
I think
They should stop bringing their American ways of doing things here to try to change things and to try to get us to do things the way they want us to do it, because we have our own system before they come in. What's your view on that?
I mean, I can understand why someone would say that, especially if someone is still living out in the legacy of colonization.
Imagine leaving everything you've ever known to start fresh in a new country. That's exactly what Tim Swain did. Not just for yourself, but to help others do the same. He's now on a mission to empower both locals and the diaspora, helping them build successful businesses. He's also written a game-changing book packed with the strategies and insights needed to move, plan, and thrive in Ghana. If you've ever dreamed of making the leap but don't know where to start, this conversation might just change everything.
The most valuable currency in Ghana is relationships.
Yes. How should people plan their move to Africa?
I think the first thing is you have to understand. I would never allow someone to do that if I was working in the States. When I hire someone, my philosophy is I hire slow, I train well, and
So welcome to Connected Minds podcast. My name is Derek Abaite, and I'm your host on this program. Now, thanks to you, we are now the #1 podcast in Ghana. In several categories across Africa, we're also #1. And it's all thanks to all the work and the effort that you have also put into spreading the word that this podcast is on the journey of changing the lives of people. Seated here today is Tim Swain, who I'm going to be speaking with. He has a business in Ghana called Enidaso. This man was able to run miles from the north to the coast. Exactly how he did it, where he got the energy, I don't know, we'll find out. But sit through this conversation and experience how an African diasporan has lived in Ghana, and his first time coming to Ghana was 2007. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. Thanks for allowing me to be here to share this platform with so many other esteemed guests. You got your iPad ready. I can see you're serious. Yeah. You're about the business, man.
Yeah. I'm about to.
There's no on the flight. So you're serious. So thanks for having me.
No, you're absolutely welcome. And you came right on time. You know, you did very well, man. Thank you. I did say that. What Maya was asking me about you, you know, why I haven't interviewed you yet, you know, and timing. You know, I think this is the right time for us to sit and have a conversation. So you first came to Ghana 2007.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so 2007 was my first time coming to Ghana. I was a part of an organization called the Impact Movement. The Impact Movement is a Christian organization that focuses on building up leaders of African descent. And they're heavily focused on missions done from Black Americans to the world, including right there in America. So long story short, 2006 at a conference called the Impact Movement National Conference, which is an amazing conference, then President Dr. Charles Gilmer said, we're going to Africa. I didn't hear Ghana, I didn't hear Nigeria. All I heard was Africa, and I was like, I gotta go. And so we had to raise our own funds to go. I think at that time it was about $3,500 or something like that. And 2007, I still have the original ticket. In I think June or July of 2007, me with about 15 other young adults from all over the United States came to Ghana. At that time, it was for a missions trip. So it was 5 weeks, and we spent time in Kumasi, Sunyani, went all around. Doing missions. And although that experience didn't have a lot of like cultural readings and stuff like that, just to be on the continent in itself was liberating, and it transformed the rest of my life. So, yeah.
When did that moment happen where you said, okay, I'm going to move here now with my family?
That was years later, and it took multiple exposures. Okay. So from 2007, I didn't come back to Ghana until 2012 through another mission trip. That's why I have an interesting relationship with missions, because on one hand, a lot of people hate on missions, but had it not been for missions, I wouldn't have had an introduction to the continent. And it was that second trip through my church in Indianapolis, Indiana, where I came in 2012 with my wife. And it was at that trip that I realized I have to bring people back here because I forgot what it felt like to simply exist in this space of humanity apart from my race that was so liberating.
In your mental space, when you first came here, what was happening?
So the first time I came here, it was the first time in my life. You've heard this many times before from a lot of other guests. It was the first time that I really saw myself as a human being first. And really, I think epitomized that vision from Dr. Martin Luther King that said, I envision one day where my children will be judged based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. The first time I ever felt like I embodied that is when I stepped foot on the continent. That was 2007. Fast forward to 2012, I felt that same feeling. And by this time, I was working. So I had graduated school, had my master's degree. I was quote unquote, middle class America by this time. So accomplished that middle class dream of America. And I felt that feeling again. And I said, you know what? I feel like this time it's different because this trip, even though I came for missions, I believe that a mission was being birthed in me to bring Black people back to the continent and infuse curriculum that empowered them theologically, that empowered them educationally, and that empowered them socially. So that trip was the one that changed everything.
But what I really want to understand is that, were you always looking to reconnect?
Yeah, I mean,
Always.
definitely. So there was always a feeling of like, Africa was a place of like, almost like this mystical place, almost like Mars. Because I didn't know anybody in my family that traveled to the continent. I had friends when I was in college, but and my friends would invite me, like some Nigerian friends and stuff. Oh man, you can come home. And I believe 1,000% that if I was more intentional, they would have absolutely took me back to Nigeria, let me meet the family, have a great experience. But, it was just the connectedness at that time. Like I didn't have a clear pathway of like, how do I get there? So I was always looking to connect. And I knew that there was different expressions of Blackness, even outside of America, that existed. But I think the connection wasn't there until, I came as a part of a missions trip. But I always had this consciousness that, the continent exists. And so for an example, for a lot of Black Americans like myself, to go to Africa is the same thing as a Muslim's pilgrimage to Mecca. It's like it has to happen at least once in my lifetime. And that's how a lot of Black Americans see it. It's like, at least one day I got to get there. But sometimes we don't have the connections and a clear pathway of like how to get there. But yes, it always existed. It always existed.
So you see, for a lot of, Africans in Africa, right? They envision going to abroad as greener pastures.
Yes, and I understand why.
Right?
Yeah.
And for you, and this starts at a very young age.
Yeah.
You could be 12 years. Then you start thinking of, I want to be a burger one day.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that what happens to you? To the the African American community? Is that what happens where when you're young, when you're growing up, do you ever think of, going to Africa as is it ever part of the plan from the young ages?
I think it depends. It depends.
Do you have these conversations, in your little groups? And
so I would say it really just depends. Like for example, for me, I didn't grow up in a family that emphasized, reconnecting with your African heritage or anything like that. My parents worked very hard. I mean, keep in mind, my father was born in a time where, when he was born, it was still illegal for him to drink out of the same water fountain as a white person. This is my father, not my great-great-grandfather, my father. So I remember asking my mother a question one time after I've been coming back and forth to Ghana and really, getting more into understanding my African identity. And I asked my mother, I said, why is it during that time, did you ever feel the need to reconnect? Because we had Black movements, especially a lot of Black movements in the, early days, even if you just go back recently to the 60s in terms of the Black Panthers, 70s, throughout that time, there's a lot of Black folks that believed in reconnecting with Africa. So I asked my mother, I said, well, why is it, that you didn't do that? And what she said to me was so significant. And I think it translates even to why the Ghanaian would want to go abroad. And she said, I didn't have time to think about that. I was simply trying to survive. So survival meant I got to get a job. I got to take care of myself. So where does reconnecting with my Black and African heritage fit into the game plan of trying to make money and survive? It's not a part of the curriculum. And so I understand where she's coming from. I mean, you're not socialized to, reconnect. And until you have like maybe a level of intentionality or you've been a part of a community that re-emphasizes that, it's very difficult to have that at the forefront of your, let me say, your cultural imagination.
I have interviewed at least 10 African Americans on this platform. Now, there is a common comment that is usually left on either YouTube or Facebook by local Ghanaians. And the comment is usually, well, they should stop bringing the American ways of doing things here to try to change things and to try to get us to do things the way they want us to do it, because we had our own culture, we have our own system before they coming in.
Yeah.
What's your view on that?
I mean, I can understand why someone would say that, especially if someone is underexposed to the world and how cultures fuse. I mean, anytime somebody goes somewhere, they're going to show up there. If you go to New York City right now in the United States, you have Chinatown. I lived in Texas. I can tell you right now, there are some parts you go to in Texas, in the United States, where everywhere you go to the stores and everything, because Texas is very close to Mexico, right? And Texas was a part of Mexico at one point. But there are some places you go to in Texas right now where all of the stores you go to, the signboards, everything is in Spanish. It's no English in Texas, in America, because people who come bring their own culture. That's just, that's just a reality that happened. I can understand when someone says that, but if I were having a conversation with that person, I would ask them specifically, what ways are you talking about? What things are you talking about infusing? Because the truth is, unfortunately, when you look at Ghana and a lot of other countries that were colonized on the continent, whether we know it or not, we are subconsciously still living out in the legacy of colonization. Here's a very specific example. Even the way we style our hair. Oftentimes, when you look at your hair, like I'm bald now, but when I had hair, I had the little kind of like twist. And so people would tell me that it just doesn't look neat. It doesn't look fine. And then we would say, why doesn't it look fine? Because the typical idea of how fine and good looks is a low cut, kind of like yours, right? A European modeled hairstyle that says that this is the way that looks neat. And when you go back into history, when you look at, how when the colonists came, even as it relates to, I don't want to get too deep into, the missionary movement, of the late 18th and 19th century. But when you looked at what it means to be a good looking, decent person, it basically was a black replica of a European. So even ourselves today, right, how we look at some of the ways, right, that our own cultural ways are actually heavily been influenced by colonization, but we don't realize it.
Do you think that maybe the local Ghanaians are a bit threatened by the influx of African Americans?
I think it could be, and understandably, if you are struggling, right, and you're making the average of maybe 1,000 or 1,500 Ghana cedis a month, right, and you go to the passport office and you got to pay a bribe just to get your passport delivered on time, and then you see a news story of 524 diasporans receiving citizenship, I can understand how that can make you upset. And I think that's why I think that sometimes we're underexposed and we don't really understand the value that exists in having a collective of people of the African diaspora coming together. But I mean, I can empathize and I understand, but I would say that it's really not a threat because the truth is economies have always been influenced by diverse sectors coming into the economy. Here in Ghana and all over Africa, we have Chinese, Lebanese, all kind of, different groups that are coming in that are doing business in Ghana. So it's not just the African Americans or those coming from the UK or the other parts of the Western world, but people are coming because they see opportunity. And I think that instead of, complaining, I think what would be great is understanding how we can build better bridges and partnerships so that we can all, benefit from this economy. In other words, there's a lot of, opportunities to go around.
Well, do you think especially for you, and if I throw this question to you, that you understand the average Ghanaian well enough to be able to join forces with?
I don't want to complicate it, but I would say that understand in the sense where I totally 100% get it. No, because I didn't grow up here, and when I moved here, I didn't come, selling from the roadside or something. I mean, listen, I've worked really hard by the grace of God, and utilize those resources here in Ghana. But I will say that I do empathize because I do understand that, as we say in Ghana, Charlie, is no easy. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. And I do empathize. And I think that's why, for me, what's important is creating platforms to partner with Ghanaians who are empowering the next generation of leaders.
So, the reason I ask that question is, I was with, someone who went to look for a product that he wanted to buy. And then this person is from the diaspora. She's African American. And then the person that was selling the product said, they don't have the exact one that you're looking for. But we have this instead. Would you be interested in that? And the first words that came out from this person's mouth was, well, I told you I'm looking for this particular one. Why are you giving me that one?
Yeah.
Do you understand?
I understand that.
That is not a Ghanaian culture.
Yes, I get that.
That response.
I get that 1,000%.
Doesn't happen in Ghana?
Yes, 1,000%.
No, so that's what I meant by, do you understand the average Ghanaian?
Okay, I get you.
Culture,
I get you.
The way we do things well enough to now say, okay, I understand you, Derek. So now let's work together.
Yes, so I get that, and I think that's an exchange that happens anytime somebody goes to a new place. I saw this video, right? It was on YouTube. It was on YouTube or IG or something, and it was it's not Ghanaian, but it was a Nigerian. And then it was a Nigerian outside in New York, and there were all these pigeons, and he caught one, and he was like, "Hey, can I eat this one?" I said, "No, Massa, you can't eat this one, because here, if you eat this one, they may take you to jail." He said, "Oh, Charlie, it's a nice bird, though. I'll go home and make fufu with this one." So it's like when you're coming from a different place, you have to adjust culturally. So for that African American, I understand where they're coming from in terms of like, I'm looking for this particular one, because sometimes the person is also may feel threatened because they don't know how to navigate. Let me give you an example, all right? Years ago, when I first came to Ghana, I remember taking Trotro from Cape Coast to Accra.
Wow.
Back when we were selling credit on the scratch cards.
Yep.
Right? So, and I remember, number one, I didn't really understand any of the language at all. Even simple things like, oh, please, I'm coming. Oh, Pacho Mebawai, like I'm coming. Like I'm going to return to you. I didn't understand any of these things. So I go to buy scratch card for like, I think 10 cedis or something. I give the lady 50 Ghana. I'm sitting in a Trotro. I don't know that the Trotro has to load before it moves. And so I'm on edge because I don't know all of these things, right? I give her 50 Ghana. She says, oh, Pacho Mebawai. She leaves. I don't understand what she's saying. I'm yelling at her, hey, come back. Where are you going?
Right.
So everyone in the church was laughing at me. And they said, oh, Charlie, she said she's just going to get change and coming back. So I'm sitting there in the church like, now I'm feeling very stupid. Because it's the feeling of like, you don't know what's going on. Right? But it's a valuable lesson that I learned because remember, I'm from the States where typically, even when you talk about exchanges like that, nobody has to run and get change from their cousin and bring it back to you. Change is delivered right there.
But that's why this conversation is important.
Yeah.
Right. To let our family back home understand that if you don't understand something in Ghana or any part of Africa, observe for some time.
Yeah.
And look at what is happening around you.
Yeah.
Because
but it's very difficult to observe. You can observe, but you don't know how to contextualize. Here's another example. When I moved to Ghana, because I had been coming back and forth, I know that, Charlie, in Ghana, nothing is free. Nothing is free.
Yes.
So when I moved into my first place, there was a guy who was kind of keeping after my place, helping some things small. And I remember asking the guy that I was working with, I said, well, I have to give him something. He said, oh, no, don't worry. He's just doing things like this. And the guy kept messaging me. He kept asking me, how far? I didn't know what how far meant. How far in my mind meant, what is the distance? Where are you?
Yeah.
But he was asking how far with my money.
Yes.
Because he was helping. I had no idea. So even when I observed these things, I literally did not know what he was talking about. Now, after I learned, right, what he was meaning, the context of even like how much to give him. Like, because when I moved into my neighborhood, now this is an atypical example. When I moved into my neighborhood, I had to settle a bunch of some of those people who were just sitting around doing nothing because they were, these are the ones who see my house every day.
Yeah.
Now, this is a context where, listen, even if you observe this thing, you don't really even know how to engage this until you have some experience.
I guess what I'm basically trying to say is that if you don't observe and ask questions and you come in and react the way you will, it makes matters worse.
It does. It does. 1,000%. I agree with you.
But I also want you to take a little bit of this point as well, which is it's not unique to African Americans.
Yeah, it's
even
everybody.
For some of us who have lived abroad for so long, we came back, we didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's sometimes Ghanaians who come are even more frustrated because sometimes Ghanaians leave with wahala, and you come back and you realize wahala is still there. And you even maybe sometimes, I don't know, but even from what I've heard from my friends is because this is home, and it's almost like they look at Ghana like a brother or a sister that has so much potential. But then you see this brother or sister just wasting their life. And it's like, I want so much for you. But when I see you doing some of the stuff that you're doing and you've never changed, it becomes so disappointing. So even the disappointment becomes multiplied. And but it's true. Listen, I talk to my friends and I tell them, listen, I had it's not necessarily a friend, but I was at a meeting one day and we were talking about police interactions and all of these things. And listen, I've been in Ghana long enough where even sometimes I just carry Coke because I'll give the guy some Coke, the police officer some Coke. Even this simple, small gesture, will make a difference. But anyway, one of the ladies was African-American was saying that I noticed that the police only bother us as African-Americans. And so we have to stop and say, listen,
that's not true.
That's not true.
That's not a true statement.
In fact, it's worse for the local Ghanaian who can't fight for himself.
Yes, who can't afford the 200 cedis to cool him down.
Exactly. So I agree with you that we have this perception oftentimes that it's erroneous and it's not accurate of what's really happening. That's why these conversations are important. And I will say this, I will admit this, right? I think a lot of times as African Americans, we don't realize how American we are until we get to Ghana.
Right.
Because in the States, you are always relegated to your race. I don't care how smart you are, any of these things. When you come to Ghana, it's actually the culture of America that exists in us. We can be entitled, we can be arrogant, and for a lot of us, you have to be. For example, for me, like in Ghana, everything is okay. Everything is fine. You just kind of relax. Sometimes we don't really speak up for ourselves in Ghana. But if you have this type of mentality in the U.S. as a black person, you will be crushed.
Right.
So sometimes you don't that doesn't turn off like that when you come to Ghana. So you have to really have these sometimes bad experiences where you stop and realize I overreacted. That was too much. To really understand that, okay, I'm safe. Nobody's trying to come and attack me. I really have the privilege to live where I want, do what I want, as long as I have the resources and I have the relationships. But sometimes that mentality doesn't turn off immediately. It takes time.
It takes time. It's the realization that has got to go at some point. I think when Ghana became a little bit easier for me to stay was when I became like the locals. Understood why they do what they do. Otherwise, you pay 200 cedis for a bottle of water. Meanwhile, it's 3 cedis.
Yeah, it's true.
Because you've created a huge gap between you and the system.
Yeah.
And it's the people that make the system.
And that's the biggest difference, right? When you're coming from a world where, Ghana, the most valuable currency in Ghana is relationships.
Yes.
But when you're coming from a world where basic things like if your street light is off, you call a number, maybe you have an app that tells you the technician will arrive between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. The technician is on the way. The technician has arrived. The technician has repaired the situation. The technician is gone. And you don't necessarily need people. You don't really understand how much you need people until you come to a place like Ghana. Again, for me, and I'm talking about a situation like Listen, the first place I lived, we had all of these issues. You go outside, the light is literally on fire. And you call the local company, they won't do anything. So you have to go and greet your neighbors. Please, do you know anyone who can repair this? Yeah. But until you live in a system where you're forced to really adopt that currency of relationships, you don't really understand how valuable that is. And sometimes that only comes through time. It only comes through time and experience. So, and I think that, I tell people who are coming, I don't care if you're a Ghanaian, Nigerian, if you're coming, if you haven't been in this culture for a while, you have to give grace to people. And for those who are here, you have to give grace to those individuals as well. Because, I think all folks are just trying to come together and live together. But there's going to be conflict no matter, anytime you have cultures coming together, there's going to be conflict.
Let me stop you here for a minute. If you've been watching this show, I want you to subscribe and become part of the family. We are on a journey of changing the lives of people on this channel. And we appreciate you for being here. But if you haven't become part of the family, connect with us. Hit the subscribe button. Now let's carry on the conversation. You mentioned in one of your interviews that you struggled with building relationships, like genuine relationship with people.
Yeah. I struggle because there's a few things. Number one, because I personally have struggled with relationships regardless of the context I'm in. That's me personally, regardless of the context. The second thing is, classism and culture have never been significant factors in developing relationships when I was in the States. Because typically, when you're developing relationships with people, typically people move in the same kinds of groups, the same class, the same education. Normally, no, and I'm not saying all the time, but normally you don't have folks who are, have PhDs and you have, now it may come out wrong, but I don't care. But people have a certain kind of intellectual and social and economic pedigree, and you're hanging out with people that are different. Not to say you can't build relationships with them, but let me tell you how it plays out. Right now, let's say you make 1,000 CDs a month, yep, and I make 100,000 CDs a month. And I say, Charlie, let's go have a good time tonight. My idea of a good time is I could maybe spend 5,000 CDs tonight. Yep. Right? Now, when it's time for us to go out and have a good time and I want to spend 5,000 CDs, you may not have the capacity to do that. And I can afford it. And it's like a drop in the bucket for me. Now, for the record, where's the camera? I don't make 1 million CDs a month, all right? So don't get it twisted. But so now when you're building relationships, sometimes you build relationships around social activities, around food, and about family. Now, let's say, for example, I want to invite you to my home. You make 1,000 CDs a month. Maybe I invite you to my home, and Charlie, you're looking at my house like, hey, Massa, Charlie, the guy has money. So now the relationship may turn into a sponsorship where my uncle is sick. My mother is sick. Yep. My daddy is sick. I want to go to school. Can you help me? Okay, no problem. But now you look at me like I'm a sponsorship. And I'm not saying that you can't have genuine relationships with people that are different, but I'm saying it's the mentality and what we place on people based on those social expectations. So for me, the difficult thing was, I go back to the example of, when I first moved here, the reality is, forget how I saw myself. When I moved to Ghana, right, you're seen as Obruni. Right. And as Obruni, you have money.
Oboga.
Yes. And your money is limitless. You just go to the ATM and you get money. In fact, you don't have to even put deposits. It's just there waiting for you. So when someone has that mentality of you, how they engage you will be based around money.
Transactional.
It's transactional. And so where you think someone is genuinely trying to assist you and maybe you've met a friend, you realize that it's transactional. Now, on the other hand, I've wisened up to understand more about where people are coming from, right? How to say no, how to, navigate relationships differently. But back then, when I was trying to develop relationships, I didn't know all of these things. So it was very difficult when someone is, hey, I'm calling you just to greet you. And I'm like, oh man, this person is so nice. And then I don't realize it's just the how do you call it? The pre-conversation
to what is coming up.
Yes.
There's something that's coming up.
Yes.
My daughter is not feeling too well.
Yes.
Have you ever had a phone call from your mechanic saying that, I haven't heard from you in a while?
Listen, I've had phone calls from everybody. So that's why even when I travel, I don't even tell people I'm traveling outside of Ghana. And when I'm outside of Ghana, if I see a number, plus 233.
You don't pick up.
I don't pick up. Because I know it's, my big boss, Charlie, there's some things I need. Okay, I don't have a problem with giving people opportunities to work. But at the same time, listen, this is not a transactional relationship. And I don't think, regardless of whether you're a Ghanaian, a Nigerian, a South African, a Brazilian, nobody wants to be in a transactional relationship with anybody, regardless of who you are. But I think that sometimes, on one hand, I get it though, right? Because that, let me say, average Ghanaian who may be making that 500 or 1,000 CDs a month, who has been underexposed about the world and about how things work, not because they're dumb or stupid, just underexposed, right? They may not know the impact of consistently asking someone for money. And it's not just an African-American thing, right? I got so many of my friends who've moved to the UK, to the US, and they tell you, Charlie, I don't even pick my phone. The way people worry me, I'm a student. I don't have money, but Charlie, people are asking me to send them this. So it's not just an African-American thing. It's the mentality that we have that says that when someone has something more than me, I am entitled to a piece of that, and I'm going to come for it. That's the thing that makes it difficult.
Again, it's so sad that it's happening, but it's not unique.
Yeah, it's not
right?
unique.
Because even for some of us, it happens all the time.
Every
the
day.
phone calls are coming in all the time.
Yeah.
The employees you have at the workplace, every now and then, they want to borrow against their salary.
Yeah.
And it keeps happening. And then you're thinking to yourself, well, if this is what you're doing, then given the opportunity, you're going to steal.
Exactly.
Given the opportunity, if it arises, you're going to steal.
Yes.
And that explains why when I first started, I sacked a lot of people very quickly.
You have
because
to.
I didn't understand what was going on. Now I'm beginning to try to navigate it a little bit better. But there's always things happening in my mind. Should I not? Where is it going to take us? Where are we going to from here?
And it takes wisdom and understanding and knowledge to be able to make those decisions. For example, when I first came to Ghana, I had house help, and this person was stealing from me. Wow. And I didn't do anything because it was 50 pesos, 30 pesos.
Oh, no, that's cool.
Oh, it's no big deal. But the integrity piece, if you steal 30 pesos, you will steal 3,000. And if I don't say anything about it, you understand? Because someone told me, actually a Ghanaian friend of mine, he said, I remember him saying, listen, Charlie, you will meet people, you will work with people for years, and they will just break your heart. And I didn't really understand what he meant. And then where I first moved in Ghana it was a temporary house. And the guy who owned the place, I would see the way he would speak to his workers. Ha! What are you doing? Don't put this here. I said, man, the guy is so mean. When I have workers, Charlie, I'm going to be this, and this. And you know what happens? Charlie, the people say, this foolish man. So let me take him for a ride. So for me, when I didn't sack the person for stealing 30 pesos, or at least, let me say, have a conversation, I enabled this person. Eventually, they stole my phone.
Wow.
And I'm so stupid, I kept them on working with me, and then eventually they stole like 50 CDs, right? That was my problem, being foolish. I would never allow someone to do that if I was working in the States. But my mentality was, what is 30 pesos? The person may not have it. But now when I hire someone, my philosophy is I hire slow, I train well, and I fire quickly.
Quick.
I hire slow. So anytime I work with somebody, they go through 3 interviews. The first interview, they don't even know it's an interview. I'll have a conversation with them. Charlie, let me talk to you tomorrow at 3 p.m. on the phone. By 3 p.m., 3:15, they don't come. I already know that they're not serious. The second interview is talking more about the job itself. What do you want to do? Why do you want to do this? Okay, you live at Tema and you're working at this place. How much is the chocho fare for you to come from this place to this place? This is the salary. Are you sure you're okay with this salary? Because when you take this from this place to this place, Charlie will be eating your salary. But have you thought about these things? The last interview is the formal, this is what it is, this is what it's not before we actually start. Then I train you. Here's the culture of the organization. In fact, I had to train some people, when you're working with me, don't throw rubbish on the ground. Don't throw rubbish in the Uber. Because you represent me. How can I be out here talking about we love Africa, let's talk about sustainability, and you're just taking and you're throwing rubbish? So I had to train people in the culture of the type of company that I wanted to create. And then I fired quickly. So now, after I've done all of that, if I have a situation where, you don't show up for the first meeting, unannounced. Then you don't show up for the second meeting, and we talk about it. By the third meeting, Charlie, you're gone. But by this time, you will know why I've sacked you.
Right, yeah.
Because I've given you plenty of opportunities. But this only came through time and being foolish, right? The first time I had to hire someone, it's 30 pesos. What is 30 pesos? Oh, I won't say anything. That's my personal issue, not the person. I should have created an environment where it is absolutely unacceptable for you to do this. But I didn't. I allowed it. I enabled it.
Tim, how should people plan their move to Africa?
Let me start with Ghana.
Okay.
I think the first thing is you have to understand your why. Why? Why do you want to move? Your why cannot be your love for, you can't move based on hatred. I hate this place so much that I just have to get out of here. Because that hate is not going to sustain you when the wahala comes. Trust me. And Ghana will bring you wahala. The second thing is I'm a little bit more kind of strategic. So let me just tell you how I planned my move. When I presented the idea to my wife, she already had lived in different places in the world, South Africa, Brazil. So she had traveled. And we came to Ghana together for the first time. So she wasn't adverse to the idea. So number one, you have to assess your whole family situation. If you're single, it may be easier than if you have a family with children. For me, it was about understanding like, where are the schools? Where's the hospitals? Because I'm thinking like, this is adult type of planning, And then, what's the best type of situation I could place myself in? It took 2 years of planning. Because during this time, I was coming back and forth and asking questions, because also I came here for school. And so I was asking questions just about everything. And for me, it was about the main things. Like my father always taught me, you have to have a roof over your head, clothes on your back, and food on the table. So I wanted to be in an environment where my son could have a stable, my family can have a stability, where we have access to decent schools, and we have access to hospitals, healthcare. These are the basics. Took 2 years of planning, getting the money together. That's the most important thing I tell people. How will you earn income? Because if you come to Ghana with no money, Charlie, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to sell whatever. And you don't have any experience in that business in Ghana. Hey, let me pray for you right now, because it'd be very difficult.
Yeah.
It'd be very difficult. But I tell people, you have to plan very well. I believe in planning very well. But I've also known people who never been to Ghana, they moved here and they're fine. Those are the anomalies, though. Those are not the average people. The average person, you need to plan well. You have to get your money together. You have to plan your money very well.
A lot of people talk about, you need a lot of money to come to Ghana. You need a lot of money to come to Ghana.
It depends on your lifestyle. I mean, if you're living, let me say, in Accra and you want to eat out every day at a restaurant, it depends. I would say the most significant expenses, and people always say Ghana is more than Accra. It is. It is more than Accra. But let's be honest. Most of the access to a lot of things are in Accra. Unfortunately, that's just the way that it is. For a person like myself who has children, you have more schools in Accra than any other place.
Right.
That's the fact. That's not my feeling. That's a fact. But anyway, everything depends on your lifestyle. I mean, if you're a single person, it may be different if you're a family of 5 and you're sending your 5 children to school.
Yeah.
And it depends on, your lifestyle. Are you traveling back and forth to South Africa or Nigeria or, the UK or the US 3 times a year with your whole family? Are you saving for retirements? Do you have investments? Do you have an education fund for you? All those things matter in terms of your lifestyle.
So let me just drop this in here, right? So Tim actually has a Move to Ghana guide, and it's on his website. So this is probably going to be the first time I'm doing this, but I know you guys are going to be in his DMs, trying to get help with this. So if you need a copy of that, just, send me a message on Instagram, or I'll put the links in the description. And you're always asking me, how can I get this person's details? anytime I speak to a guest, I put the details in the description. But you simply, so if you need anything, just look at the description and then check, and you have access to the guest, right? Fantastic. I think that would be very helpful for people.
No, it will be
Yeah.
because it was. I spent a lot of money and a lot of time writing this, not in terms of how much it cost to produce it, but how much time I lost, not realizing what a poly tank is. Where does the water come from? For example, in the guide, I think I have a part. I think it's like 40 or 50 questions you need to ask when renting or buying a home in Ghana.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure.
The top 3 things
Yeah.
that you wrote in that book
Yeah.
that you think is going to be useful for my audience.
Number one thing is determining whether you want to live or you want to visit. That's number one. The second thing is you have to get that guide on asking questions about renting or buying a home. That is so important. If you're coming from the West, you have no idea just the differences of questions that you need to ask. I think the third thing is I give an actual timeline of like, from the time you decide I'm going to move, a checklist of ID, bank account, this, like I literally lay out the steps of what you need to do if you're going to relocate. So determining if you're going to visit or you're going to move permanently, whether it's a year or 2 years. The second thing is that guide on asking questions when renting a home in Ghana. That in itself is worth the book. And then the third thing, that checklist, I tell you exactly what you need to do from start to finish when you want to idealize the move to actually executing the move.
Okay, so I'll tell you something, right? There's a couple that spoke to me some time back. And the man had been, talking to someone about a land in Ghana. And then the agent said, oh, there's a beautiful land in Aburi. The family paid for it. They paid for everything, and then he got the land. Now the time comes when the husband and wife were coming to Ghana for holidays. So they decided to go and have a look at the land. Not knowing that is way away from Aburi, somewhere in Mampong. When the woman got there, he said, this is the land you bought. If this is the land, then I'm not interested. So now they had to go back, find another money to come and buy, another land for the family. So it's very important that you take some of the tips that, Tim is going to give you on your move to Ghana. Fantastic. Now let's talk about the wahala. Some of the wahalas that you've had.
Where do you want to start? Let me say the biggest wahala is, I think, adjusting my mind, because I love the continent so much that, again, I see it as a place of refuge.
Okay.
I see it as a place of destiny, and I see it as a place of legacy. And with that in mind, I think that, again, like the example of having a brother or a sister with so much potential, and it's like you see them doing foolish things, you're like, but you're so smart. Why are you doing these things? The biggest wahala is my mind of, like, when I look at Ghana, right? And I go back to even how we've had these Pan-African connections. Dr. Martin Luther King was there at the inauguration when Nkrumah, right, was being installed as the first president of the Republic of Ghana, on this day, right, in 1957. When you look at people like W.E.B. Du Bois, who was a prolific activist, leader, a scholar in not just Black America, but in history, and how he relocated to Ghana, right? He's buried here today. So there's been these linkages because people have seen something that's really significant. So for me, the biggest wahala is when I look at the country of Ghana and I see what it could be. But then you see some of the foolishness. The basics, for example, our education system. And you look at how some of our children are graduating from university. The practical skills like critical thinking, taking initiative, being able to do research, and they paid all of this money for a university degree, but they don't know how to do anything. It's disappointing. When you look at some of our schools, even within Accra, and you go there and you see the state of the school, and oftentimes it's deplorable. You understand? Those are the types of wahalas that really make me feel a certain way. It's not the person cheating me for 5 cities, 10 cities. I know how to navigate this. It's not the police officer who wants to, I know how to navigate these things. It's the bigger issues that impact not just African Americans or Bogas or Brunis, but it's the issues that impact us as citizens of the continent and as citizens of the world. So these are the wahalas that I look at that really burden my soul of like, how can we do something about these things? You get me?
Let me stop you here for a minute. If you've been watching this show, I want you to subscribe and become part of the family. We are on a journey of changing the lives of people on this channel. And we appreciate you for being here. But if you haven't become part of the family, connect with us. Hit the subscribe button. Now let's carry on the conversation. I was at the office yesterday, and I had not been there for like 3 months, and they employed 2 more people, the manager did, that I wasn't aware of, because the workload was, going up. And, in the meeting, I said, you know what, I want to take 2 of you to my office to do, some product management for the company. And these ladies came. So we had a discussion. I put 2 laptops in front of them. Started showing them. They didn't even know where the start button is. They did. Now, at this point, I was like, okay, do you think you guys can do this? This was the point they all said, no, we can't. We just realized that we don't have the skills. And I said, are you willing to learn? I can teach you. These times, I'm talking to a 28-year-old and a 34-year-old, and they don't know how to use a computer. So it took a lot of work and a lot of mental programming to make them understand that what I'm teaching them is what they missed out about 20 years ago.
You get me? That's the thing. That's the wahala that saddens my soul. When I look at how many of our youth, if we want to talk about that's not our culture and this and this and that, let's get down and talk about it. When we talk about even things like discipline, sometimes we laugh at how certain people treat their children. But I ask myself, if this is our culture, the way we do certain things, not all things, but certain things, even the way sometimes we beat our children, all of these things, shut up, you just listen. You don't have to say anything in this house, all of these types of ways. What does it actually produce? When someone who's 28, who may have a university degree, you understand, who knows how to say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, mommy, yes, daddy. And there's nothing wrong with respect, but you've beaten the identity out of them. So now when it comes to even learning how to speak up for themselves, to ask questions and all of these things, they don't know how to do it. You go to them, you give them an opportunity. Okay, what questions do you have? You have an opportunity. Oh, we don't have any questions about anything. No, sir, you are the boss, so you are supposed to tell us what to do. Are you sure? But then how can you compete in a global market? The reality is the skills that you're learning today was the skills that most of the world has learned 20 years ago. That's the wahala that saddens my soul. So now just to take the time to catch you up, by the time I catch you up, you'll be here while the world is going here. So, and it's because of the way you look at our education system, it's true and poor. It's be seen and not heard. All of these things. So even that's why we have the NGO, Inidaso, right? We partner. We partner with folks who've been in the trenches, right? Those Ghanaians, those Africans who've been in the trenches, who understand the education system, who are working to change it. We partner with those individuals to bring different sets of skills. The thing that we bring that's a little bit different is the identity piece. Because sometimes we just bring the skills, but we don't bring the identity. When you liberate the African mind, then you can transform the world. Because what good does it do to have someone who's a millionaire, but they still see everything in Africa as inferior? What would that person do when it's time for them to set up a business? Now, granted, I empathize with business folks here because when you talk about distribution and it can get difficult. But when you talk about someone who may be in a position of authority and power, now you're a millionaire, but you see everything in Africa as inferior. Everything. So now you won't take the time to empower local artisans. You won't take the time to even hire people and train them. You will buy things. You will take your money and buy house and car from the US or the UK. So what's the purpose of teaching you all these skills if it doesn't translate back to the continent to help other people? So for us, we focus on identity, teaching you that, when you look at, for example, Timbuktu, people came from all over the world to be trained in math and science. Those were Africans. These folks who build the pyramids, scientists to today, with PhDs are still trying to manage how did they do it. Yep. Even to the point where people who have PhDs will say that it was built by extraterrestrials. Less than 3% of the population in the US have a PhD. So this is the most educated people who cannot ascertain that Africans have built a system and a structure that is so sophisticated that it is still standing to this day. So we will ascribe extraterrestrials who have done it. You understand? So when you help some of these young Africans that we empower understand that this is your lineage, right? As you've mentioned, right, sometimes from birth we are programmed to believe that Africa is inferior. The whole continent is inferior and the West is superior. Yep. But we have to reverse that. And we have to show them the beauty of Ghana first. You know, sometimes people have never left their region, and I understand why. And that's the same thing in most parts of the world. In the US, the average person who lives in an underdeveloped, poor neighborhood only travels about 15 miles outside of where they live. That's what research says. So it's just not a phenomenon that's unique to Ghana. It's a phenomenon that happens around. So we first try to help them understand your lineage of where you come from as an African. You have been great throughout history. Here's some beauty about Ghana. So we start reshaping your mind. Then we teach you, as we're teaching you business, now we teach you to do things with excellence, not just anyhow. Because now when you do it with excellence, already you're going to be way above most of your peers. Now you can charge more because you have an excellent product and you do excellent service that you can deliver on. So it's going to help meet your economic need. It's going to help meet a need in the marketplace. And it's going to help you reinvest in a community because there's somebody like you that's waiting on you to do something about the problems that you saw. You get me? So for me, it's all about how can we help people to be the next generation of leaders that we complain about right now today.
You think even the local Ghanaians have got identity problems?
Absolutely. 1,000%. 1,000%. 1,000%. Oh, not all, not most, but a lot.
What makes you say that?
Look at the way we were trained in school. You even, I don't know what you said in Tree, right? But there's an old phrase that says that if you're on your way to church and you see a white man, you can go home because you've seen God. So there's a theologian by the name of Dr. William Augustus Jones. He said that our theology determines our anthropology, and our anthropology determines our sociology. So this is what it means. The way we see God determines how we see each other. And how we see each other determines how we structure our society. So if I see God as someone that doesn't look like me as a European, right? That's going to determine how I treat my fellow black man and how I treat the Obruni when he comes. You understand? So if the way I'm treating my fellow black man in Obruni when he comes is like this, that's going to determine how I structure my business, how I structure my communities, how I set up my fares and my taxi. When I charge Obruni this price versus the other person, all of these things is stemmed on how we see each other. So when you ask the question, absolutely, a lot of us have this problem. Even if you go to our education system, right? Our education system is still the British curriculum that does not reinforce African heritage, lineage, and pride. Even if you look at a lot of our commercials and adverts on television, it really, there's a subconscious, messaging that says that we're inferior. And we believe it. When we come to Ghana, that's how we do in Ghana. Things are inferior. We don't have to do things with excellence. So that's not everyone, you understand. But the idea is that we are Africans. What can we do? I even had one of my individuals. Again, it depends on education and exposure, how you see yourself and how you see the world. But if you talk about average Ghanaians. I've had conversations with, for example, average people who are 28, 30 years old with relatively no education. Maybe just they've graduated SHS, but haven't been exposed to just different types of people. And they've said things to me like, we talk about, hey, Charlie, the white man, Charlie, these people, they are so smart, though. Us Africans, what can we do?
Wow.
These things happen. And, and it stems from education, unfortunately, it stems from education. and the way we're socialized, as a Ghanaians and a lot of times as Africans as well. But it's changing. I think it's changing so much. With social media being so prevalent, that's exposing other parts of the continent. And I think social media is exposing us to ourselves.
Yep.
The tide is changing, and we have so much more access to each other because of social media that people are asking questions and are waking up and really beginning to, transform things. The last thing I'll say is this too, right? It's all about access and exposure. Because, for example, let's say you're in Ghana.
Yep.
And you want to wear your natural hair, right? Maybe you want to have locks. People call them dreadlocks, but let's say locks. You want to wear your natural hair because you want to feel like, Charlie, I'm expressing myself. And you go to a job. And they say, Master, we don't like it. Cut your hair or we won't hire you. And you need this job. What will you do?
You will
cut it by all means. Or if I tell you, Derek, Charlie, listen, you have to read this book. Where will you buy it in Ghana? If I give you a book written by, a Black American theologian that's prolific, that's profound, that's poignant, where will you buy it in Ghana? If I tell you, go pick this book up by Kwame Bediako, right? Theology and Identity, by all means, that book cries. It's his thesis on theology and identity about Africans and theology, but where will you buy it in Ghana? Can you afford it? So it's also about access as well. So sometimes it's difficult to access the resources to even learn about yourself. But again, social media is changing that.
It's definitely changing it. Okay, cool. So this is where we are at this point. So for some of you guys that's been asking about the new ebook that I've got out, it's on Amazon and you can get it. It's the 4 Pillars to Success. And this book talks about, it's actually 40 pages. It's just 40 pages. Very interesting. I think the next book I'm going to have come out is going to be 20 pages, but this is just 40 pages. And it's going to talk about building confidence and breaking limiting beliefs. Now, the 4 pillars you need to become successful. I've read countless amount of books. Countless on success, mindset, you name it, business. And I've put everything into a 40-page book that you can read, and it'll change the way you think about money and how you've ever been taught about money. All right. So the next step is, how did the steps of getting your citizenship look like? And step 1, step 2, step 3.
Step 1, it was just a coincidence. Step 2, it was just a coincidence.
Okay.
To be honest, so I've been in Ghana and I tried to do citizenship. There's a few things, right? There's a law called the right to abode that was put in place, I believe, with our former president, that basically said if you come from the African diaspora and you want to basically reside in Ghana and get citizenship, you just have to show that obviously you're not have a criminal record from your own country, blah, 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 blah. But when I went to do this route, Charlie, nobody knew anything about this, Oftentimes in Ghana, we have laws, but people are like, oh, we don't really enforce this thing. So I was going back and forth to even top people in immigration. And it was very difficult. So literally what happened one day was I reached out to a friend last year about just updating my residency. And she said, have you heard about this program? This was the program where the recent 524 citizens of the African diaspora received citizenship. I said, no, I've never heard about this program. She said, okay, I'm going down to file my paperwork. Send me your paperwork, your details. I sent my paperwork and details. After that, they called and you went in for your interview. After the interview, you go for your biometrics. After the biometrics, you went to the ceremony. It was just like that.
How much did you have to pay for that?
I think, don't quote me, but I believe it was maybe 3,000 or 3,500 CDs, Ghana CDs.
Okay. And in the interview, what sort of questions were they asking you?
It was, so basically it was, how long have you been in Ghana? Do you have a business in Ghana? You have a family in Ghana? Some of these kind of questions that they ask you, I think when you're going for a visa or something. So it was just questions around, your business, your family, your civic activities in Ghana, stuff like that.
What other reasons would they have had to refuse you?
To be honest, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. But I know that it was just. I do know it was definitely some wahala on Ghana Twitter about the citizenship thing. That's why I tell people I can't tell you how to navigate the process, because for me it was literally just like it was a coincidence. Well, it was an answered prayer for me, but it was like a coincidence, like because it just so happened that and our former president was pushing out this initiative, and he was making sure that it was done and executed, and that's what happened. That's what happened.
Amazing. At this point, motivation or discipline?
Motivation or discipline? Okay, motivation will get you started, but discipline will help you sustain. Yeah.
Great. And recommend a book for my audience. Usually on self-development or business.
I'm going to recommend a book on theology.
Okay.
Because to understand the African, we have to go back to God. Every African is inherently religious. That doesn't mean every African is of a particular religion, but we all are religious. In fact, one author said that Africans are incurably religious. A book I'll recommend, listen, I'll say this. I'll say any books by Kwame Bediako or John Mbiti.
Okay.
Any books by Kwame Bediako or John Mbiti. So if you go to Google, any books by Kwame Bediako or John Mbiti.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time with us. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, can you leave a review and then share the link so that some of your friends can also get to hear about what Connected Minds podcast is doing? It has been an awesome conversation with Tim himself. And thank you so much, Tim, for your time coming here to sit down with me. I appreciate it a lot. And if you guys are looking for a way to reach Tim, it's going to be in the description. Click on it and then follow his YouTube account as well. Subscribe. Let's push him to 35,000. I think he's on 25, 27.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. But thank you so much. I'm out.